This is a can of Coke. This can is around 18 years old, but you won't even know that until I show you the current one. Here's the current can. Unless you see them together, it's difficult to tell the differences. Speaking of distinctions, these two cans differ greatly from one another. The term classic appears in the older one, but not in the current one. That one word may not seem like much, but it's what this entire video is about. Coca-Cola has been around since 1886. Yes, you heard correctly. It's older than anyone watching this. It's one of the most recognizable products and logos in the world, and I can confidently say that almost everyone watching this is familiar with Coca-Cola. In fact, it's so popular that some people in the US use it instead of the term for all sodas. If Coke is starting to replace the term soda, then Coke is doing fairly well. This brings us to one of the most popular, well-known, and adored brands the world has ever seen. Coca-Cola was getting close to 100 years in 1985 without making any significant changes to the recipe or taste. Everyone had become acclimated to and loved the taste, but they made one decision to alter things just before they turned 100, and that was to change the recipe in a way that made it taste completely different. No exaggeration here, the Coca-Cola Company replaced the traditional soda with a completely new cola and removed it from all North American shelves. They made no attempt to hide it and instead informed the public about it. All the new cans of Coke were clearly labeled with a tag that said new, and the product became known as New Coke.
This has got to be the boldest consumer product move of any kind, of any stripe, since Eve started to hand out apples.
As a result, those who had been drinking this soda for as long as 100 years were no longer able to purchase it. Their only option was this new offering from Coke or switching to Pepsi or another competitor. Although it may seem insane, this is exactly what happened. Coca-Cola all at once abandoned their recipe and their customers were outraged. You may be thinking that the Coca-Cola executives have gone entirely insane at this point, but when you hear their side of the story, everything starts to make a little more sense. As most firms do, Coke was doing taste testing for their products, the kind of thing where you place pair unlabeled sodas in front of someone and ask them which one they liked. Through these studies, they were able to create something that people genuinely liked more than Coke. When they served someone one cup each of the new drink and Coke, they found that most of the time, the new drink was preferred. Additionally, they would compare these two beverages with Pepsi, and the new soda typically came out on top. And the fact that Coke created something that people liked more than Pepsi was a huge plus. Coke and Pepsi have been engaged in an ongoing feud for many years. I might make a video about this rivalry in the future because it's so deep. So when Coke had finally created something that was better than Coke and Pepsi, it was big news. But how should they handle this? They have something potentially massive on their hands and needed to handle it carefully. I suppose most of us are thinking right now that they should have introduced the new drink together with the original Coke. However, compared to now, things were a little different in the 1980s. There weren't 18 different kinds of Oreos and 12 different kinds of Captain Crunch. In 2024, it is not a huge deal to launch a new variety of Coke, but it was 30 years ago. Remember that Pepsi and Coke are fierce rivals, and the company that can claim to sell more than the other has a significant competitive advantage. A Pepsi commercial or a billboard that indicates that they sell more than Coke carries a lot of weight, considerably more than it would today, and even now, it would be an effective campaign. Coke, therefore, was leading Pepsi by a narrow margin and was keen to maintain that lead. For the most of its 99-year history, Coca-Cola sold only Coca-Cola. A few years earlier, they introduced Diet Coke and were just now introducing Cherry Coke. While these products were beneficial to the company, they took away sales from regular Coke and were helping Pepsi close that gap. I know it's a strange scenario, but Coke was taking sales away from themselves and Pepsi was getting closer to being able to claim that regular Pepsi outsells regular Coke. So introducing this new Coke as yet another Coke product would almost certainly take sales away from the regular Coke and ultimately help Pepsi. Coke doesn't want to help Pepsi, so they didn't want to do this. So the question once again becomes, how do they manage this delicious new beverage? The other idea going around at the time is that they could slowly transform the old product into the new product gradually and not bring any attention to it. However, they came to the conclusion that it would be too hard to pull off quietly, and I would expect that some of those transitional sodas may have questionable tastes as well. Well, at this point, replacing old Coke with new Coke doesn't sound quite as crazy anymore, and I have to admit, it was a risky move, but not a crazy move. It could potentially have a big payoff. So they went through with it. They replaced their old product with this new, better tasting product, and it didn't work. Sales of the new product were good at first, but they might have been the result of curious consumers purchasing it. There was a significant backlash overall. So were the taste tests wrong? Was this actually an inferior product? I don't think so, but there's theories that they were. The new drink tasted sweeter and might be good in small amounts, as it was throughout the trials, but after a while people got tired of that. Though that isn't the main problem, it's still significant. The fact that regular Coke was discontinued was the actual problem, the core of their company that people had grown to love. The new drink was probably better tasting overall, but it just wasn't Coke. It's the ideal illustration of how people prefer what they know over something that's new and better. You can all probably relate to this too. I'm sure there's a movie out there that you love. Just because you watched it as a kid, you would prefer it over a new, better movie. How about the car you drive? Some of you, I'm sure, drive old beat-up cars that you wouldn't exchange in for a brand new one. Everybody has love for familiar things. Because you are accustomed with and have grown to adore Coke, many of you would prefer to sip on one right now over a new, probably better drink. So it was as if someone had taken away your beloved old, beat-up car when they took away Coca-Cola from the public. People were furious, and I can't blame them. I'm not saying Coke is an old, beat-up car. I'm saying it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how good or bad the old product was. What matters is that they desired that particular product.
They changed my Coke.
Coke and the public both realized how vital their product was to some people as a result of the entire incident. You never know what you have until it's gone, I guess. And people realized what they had when it was gone. The public's perception of the original Coke was improved as a result. It was hard to get a standard Coke in North America for a total of 3 months in 1985. Following that, they acknowledged their mistake and brought it back, and sales spiked again, as one might anticipate. Some people think that this was all planned. Coca-Cola took away their soda to make people realize how much they wanted it. In my opinion, a company would have to be insane to try anything like this because it is so risky, and I wouldn't advise anyone to try it. Coke's 99-year history and close relationship with its customers are the sole reasons it succeeded. Without that, any company would most likely fail under the same conditions. But let's go back to the beginning. The word classic is printed on this older can because the company wanted people to understand that it was the original Coke and not the new Coke. It was reintroduced under the name Coca-Cola Classic, and it stayed that way for more than 20 years.
What we didn't know was how many thousands of you would phone and write asking us to bring back the classic taste of original Coca-Cola. Well, we read and we listened, and you know the rest. They're both yours, the new taste of Coke and Coca-Cola Classic.
These days, most people have forgotten about the new Coke incident, and no one confuses this product with the new Coke. However, it was one of the most significant stories in the country at the time. Something I think that's funny is when Coke announced that they were bringing back the classic recipe, ABC interrupted their program and covered it as breaking news. New Coke was still sold as Coke, renamed Coke 2 after a few years, and was eventually discontinued altogether. What happened to New Coke doesn't even matter. The focus here is the absence of the old Coke. In all of this, New Coke was only the victim. It got a bad name, and the whole situation was thought to be a crazy decision from Coca-Cola. But in the end, it all worked out, and the company came out of this better than ever before. The conclusion of this very unusual story is something that few could have predicted. It demonstrates the impossibility of change for Coca-Cola and any other company that depends on the nostalgia of its customers. People are buying the product for what it is, whether it's good or bad. Please share your thoughts on all of this in the comments section. Was replacing the original Coke a crazy decision, or would you have done the same? In retrospect, it was an easy choice, but consider yourself in their shoes and then let me know what products you would hate if they made any changes. I'd like to hear what you have to say. Thank you for watching and your support.